The following podcast is a deep, shallow dive production.
And you're going to love it.
Okay, let's go.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Happy Wednesday. Hey, first of all, I do apologize. Something was goofy in yesterday's episode. There was a slight echo or reverb. I think I had accidentally clicked on a setting in this GarageBand software that I use to record these things, because when I was listening to the episode on my run yesterday, I was like, this sounds off a little. And so I think I clicked something. I don't know. I did something, but it sounded a little bit off. I didn't like it. So I do apologize. I was going to actually record it again, but then I was like, nah, I'm not going to do that. Hey, listen, nobody's perfect, right? All right. So, a couple things on yesterday's episode, because ironically, I got a few interesting messages about it. Again, first of all, I really do like Candace Owens. I do. And if you don't, honestly, I just would be curious if you've given her a chance, And again, here's the thing. And gosh, I hope this is coming through loud and clear. But again, I don't like everything she says, or I don't agree with everything she says. Again, probably the biggest thing is, she's a tremendous believer in Christ. And that's amazing for her. I mean, I think that's incredible that she gets so much out of it. But the fact that, I really like a lot of her opinions, and we probably don't share that in common, which seems like it's the most important thing in her life. That right there should tell you something. And that should really, in a lot of ways, be a little bit of separation between church and state, literally and figuratively. And I fully respect everyone's religious takes, but I think it's a rare person that can basically have your religious takes and have your religious perspective, but then treat politics a little bit differently and, separate the two. And I think she can do that and does do that, for the most part. There's even a couple areas there that she talks about, which I really don't agree with, and I'll mention that in another episode. But anyway, I'm just telling you, she calls it out on the Republicans and the conservatives, and that's what I like. Of course, she's going to call it out on the folks she doesn't agree with, which a lot of times is the Democrat side. But I like the fact that she calls out her own side, because I'm telling you, it's a rare person on the Republican side that does that, and I do really like that. All right. Secondly, what was I going to say? Oh, the JD Vance stuff. I mean, again, all my point with playing that clip from her yesterday, and my point overall with him, and gosh, I've said this from the beginning, is the dude is just, he's been placed into that. He just has. He's been placed into that. He did not come up through the ranks. And honestly, it's interesting, there are a lot of similarities to Obama's ascension back in 2008. I'll have to go back and try and dig back and revisit that whole 2008 Democratic nomination. But he came out of nowhere. He really did. And with JD Vance, the concept of controlled opposition and the concept of, again, this whole Trump assassination thing, I've said this a few times, and I should have brought this into yesterday's episode. If you take the position that there is a quote unquote group of folks that are globalists, that are uniparty, that are whatever, if you say, okay, you know what, I do think that exists, and I do think those people want to take Trump out, right? The one thing I've said before, and I'm going to say it again, is honestly, if they really wanted Trump gone, he'd be gone, I've made this joke before, but they wouldn't rent a shooter off of Temu or buy a shooter at the 99-cent store. And what I mean by that is, they have such sophisticated means of doing everything and anything that you're not gonna entrust that in a 20-year-old knucklehead or this other dude, who's just completely unhinged. I think if they really, 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 truly wanted him off the chessboard, he'd be gone. And gosh, he might have been gone in 2016, in 2015, or maybe 2017, 2018 when he was in power. So anyway, it's just the stuff is off. And I don't think, what she was saying, what Candace was saying was that her point was that whoever this is trying to do this to Trump, if there is a group, they're comfortable with JD Vance being president. And I do agree with that because I think JD Vance is, part of something. I'll just leave it at that, part of something. All right, anyway. All right, speaking of JD Vance, that's funny. Perfect segue. So it looks like him and Tim Walz are going to debate on October 1st. It's going to be a vice presidential debate. I think that's going to be interesting. I really do, actually. And I'll make the call right now. I think JD Vance will get the best of him. And the reason I say that is because I think that there were a lot of things that Tim Walz did as governor of Minnesota during COVID, during the BLM riots, during all of that stuff that are going to come out. And it's not going to be a good look. It's not going to be a good look because I think that now that we are a few years removed from that and the emotions have died down, I think a lot of those decisions that were made in 2020, really it was 2020 in terms of the BLM riots, and then 2021-ish, early 2022 in terms of how those governors dealt with COVID. I think those things are going to come out, and people now with a lot less emotion and a lot less fear, for that matter, are going to be like, dude, that was terrible decision making. So anyway, let's see kind of what plays out there, but that debate is going to be October 1st. It'll be interesting. All right, so check this out. Today I'm going to do something super cool and hopefully introduce you guys to the latest cool thing when it comes to AI, which you might not have heard about because honestly, it hasn't really been publicized that much. But so Google released something called Notebook LM, and the LM stands for language model, and all of these big, ChatGPT type things, Gemini from Google, all that, they're all basically called large language models, LLMs. And so Google launches this thing called Notebook LM, and let me give you the exact web address. If you want to check it out, just go to Notebook LM, again, Notebook L Larry M Mary .google. And so it's intended to kind of be a AI tool to quickly summarize note taking, right? But basically how it works is you feed it all your data sources, and then it has a ridiculously insane option to then take all those data sources. And so, for example, what I did is I downloaded the 900-page Project 2025 PDF. So remember Project 2025, it's been kind of the bane of Trump's campaign because it's that thing that the Heritage Foundation came out with. And then from there, basically, Democrats have been criticizing it because it really talks about radical change in government, and they've associated it with Trump and that being his plan. So if you vote for him and he wins, this is what's going to happen. This is what they're going to do. And the thing is, like, it's a beast. I've talked about it before. It's 900 pages. So I downloaded that PDF, which you can download off of their website. And I basically took that PDF and I dropped it into a new notebook that I created in this Notebook LM. And then here's the crazy part. So it has the ability to take that data source, and then I was going to add several different website links as additional data sources, because you can do that. You can add multiple pieces of data, but I didn't, because everything written about this project 2025 is so skewed mainly in a negative way. I didn't want that to factor in the mix. I wanted just the document itself to be analyzed. And this is wild. So you click a button and it basically turns all of your data sources, which in this case is just the 900-page PDF. So it turns that into a podcast episode. And it's insane how realistic it sounds. And it's a podcast episode between a guy and a girl. You can't use multiple voices yet, but I think this is going to blow you away. I mean, obviously I've played the 11 Labs stuff before, and I've done, simulated voices, and they're all pretty good. But man, this is another level. So I'm going to play you this. It turned it into a podcast episode. It turned that 900-page document into a podcast episode. I might chime in along the way, or maybe I'll just wait till the end. But I think this will be very interesting. And I will say, I did kind of fact check it and double check it, and I tried to see how well it analyzed the document. And I have to say it did a pretty good job. It really kind of brought out a lot of pros and a lot of cons. Actually, it's not that it brought out pros and cons, but it did describe what's in there. And then it's our decision whether to determine if that's a pro or a con. So, all right, let's give this a listen. So remember, these are not real human beings talking. This is a simulated podcast created by Google's new Notebook LM. By the way, two more quick things. As far as data sources, you can actually add up to 50 different data sources, which, wow, that's pretty amazing. And then secondly, the funniest part was when you go to make the podcast episode, it says, "Do you want a deep dive?" Isn't that funny? Deep dive. All right, give a listen to this, and welcome not to the future, but welcome to the present. Notebook LM, dissecting Project 2025.
All right. You were a kid when you said you wanted to go deep.
I did warn you.
This mandate for leadership document is a beast.
It's extensive.
It's like the policy equivalent of War and Peace.
It really is remarkable, though.
Yeah.
This isn't just some typical policy document. It's not just, trying to win an election. It wants to fundamentally reshape the role of government
Totally. Yeah.
in American life.
Yeah.
Top to bottom.
Yeah. And it's not just talking about the ideas, right?
Yeah.
Like it's actually laying out a plan.
A blueprint.
For a hypothetical new president in 2025.
Yes.
To put these ideas into action.
From day one.
From day one.
Okay.
Like we're talking taxes, defense,
The whole game.
education, family, you name it.
It's all in here.
It's in here. So are you ready to put on our X-ray specs?
Let's do it.
And see what's really going on beneath the surface.
Absolutely.
Okay.
All right, so real quick, I mean, that's pretty impressive. Obviously, I think if I had just played this for you guys without telling you what it was, you would have thought it was two real human beings having the conversation. I think the thing that struck me from the beginning was the fact that he was like, this thing's a beast. This is a real beast. And again, remember, it's not like that was written in the document. He's basically saying that because I uploaded a 900-page PDF. So, it's amazing that it has that context, or I should say is contextual along those lines. All right.
One of the most striking things, I think, when you dig into this document is its relentless focus on shrinking the government.
Okay.
Particularly what they call the administrative state.
Right. They use that phrase a lot.
They do.
It sounds a little ominous, doesn't it?
It does have, it has kind of a dystopian ring to it.
Yeah, yeah. For those of us who haven't gotten the memo,
yes,
what are they actually referring to?
Essentially, they're talking about the vast network of federal agencies.
Right.
The alphabet soup of government bureaucracy that's become, a favorite target for conservative thinkers for decades at this point.
Right.
But they really take it to another level in this document.
Okay, so give us some examples. What are we talking about here?
So I think the EPA, FDA, even the Department of Education,
Right.
they argue that these agencies have become too powerful, too unaccountable, and too disconnected from the will of the people.
Okay, so it's not just about smaller government in general, but specifically targeting these agencies.
It's about really kind of going after what they see as the heart of the beast.
Interesting.
All right, you know what? I am going to chime in a couple things. All right, so oh, by the way, I should say this. Remember, Google fundamentally is kind of the beast that these guys, well, when I say these guys, I'm talking Project 2025, you could say that they consider Google a beast as well, along with these agencies. So remember, this is coming from Google, just analyzing the document. And, a lot of people, consider Google big tech. They think of them compromised. They think of them as an extension of the government. So I did find this actually pretty interesting. I thought it was going to be, honestly, I thought it was going to be more overtly negative toward Project 2025, but it might not be overtly positive. But what I do think is it's calling it out pretty decently. And, like that statement right there, getting large government organizations under control. I mean, that's not bad. That's not bad.
But why? What's the end game here?
Well, they argue that these agencies stifle individual liberty and economic growth with burdensome regulations.
Right.
Their solution is to essentially dismantle or significantly downsize them.
Wow.
Shifting power back to states. Or to the private sector.
So to give you a sense of how far they want to go, they even call into question the constitutionality of independent agencies like the FTC, suggesting they should either be eliminated or stripped of their enforcement power.
That's a pretty radical step.
Yeah. Imagine the ripple effects if that actually happened.
Yeah.
We're talking about a massive shift in how industries are regulated.
Absolutely.
How consumer protections are enforced.
Yeah. It makes you wonder, would this lead to a burst of economic activity and innovation?
Right.
Or would it open the door for corporations to run wild? I mean...
Right. It cuts both ways.
It does.
And that's the million-dollar question.
That is the question, yeah.
Because, they seem to have a lot of faith in the free market to regulate itself.
They do.
They argue that by getting the government out of the way, businesses will thrive.
Right.
Competition will flourish. Everyone will ultimately benefit.
Invisible hand, right.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
All right, so that's the first, major theme I took from this. So fundamentally, the document is saying, get government out of the way and businesses will thrive. So, again, most people would say, oh, that's a Republican mindset. That's a capitalistic mindset versus, let's say, a socialism mindset. So I guess you have to decide, okay, do I agree with that or do I not agree with that? If we were to get government out of the way, is that better for me or is that worse for me?
But is it really that simple?
Yeah.
I mean, regulations exist for a reason, right?
That do.
To protect consumers, workers, the environment.
Of course.
So, I don't know. It's an interesting...
It's a utopian vision in some ways.
Yeah.
That's maybe a little bit blind to some of the realities.
It definitely raises some questions.
It does.
And this is where I think their laser focus on individual liberty gets really interesting.
Yes.
Because it bumps up against another one of their key themes.
Okay.
Which is empowering political appointees.
Interesting.
So there's this weird tension, right?
Yes.
Where they seem to want to shrink the government, but also exert tighter control over the people who are running it.
All right, really quick. I mean, that is an interesting point. It's like overall, I feel like the document is all about shrinking government, but then by the same token, you want to exert tighter control over the shrunken version. So, I mean, you could say that's a contradiction. All right, I'm with you there.
Right.
It's a fascinating contradiction.
It is. It's like they're saying we trust individuals to make their own choices. Unless those individuals work for the federal government.
Exactly. It's like, unless you're in charge, we don't trust you.
Exactly.
So it seems like they're deeply skeptical of career bureaucrats.
Oh, yeah.
Who they see as entrenched.
Part of the swamp.
Yeah. and potentially hostile to a conservative agenda.
Deeply skeptical, and they want to make it much easier to get rid of people that they see as problematic.
Well, that's what I was going to say, because there's this whole section on overhauling the hiring process, making it easier to appoint and potentially remove individuals at all levels of government.
All levels, that's the key, right?
So it's almost like it's less about shrinking the government and more about reshaping it.
Right.
Putting people in charge who share their ideology or their worldview.
It's about control.
It's about control.
At the end of the day,
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
So that brings us to, I think, another really fascinating and potentially controversial aspect of this document, which is their emphasis on family values.
Right.
Which,
a classic.
It's a classic conservative talking point, right?
It is a familiar refrain.
The importance of the traditional family. Very important.
Of course.
But this document goes beyond just rhetoric, right?
It does. It really tries to put some teeth behind this.
Right. So it frames the breakdown of the traditional family as like a fundamental threat to American society.
Almost an existential crisis.
Yeah.
And they argue that government policy should actively work to reverse this trend.
So it's not just about protecting the family.
Right.
It's about like...
All right, so really quick, this part's actually very interesting because, I mean, I support the family unit. I really do. I'm all about the family. I'm all about family in general, and I'm all about strengthening family. I think that kids with the right, family support structure, and quite frankly, even adults with the right family support structure thrive. And I feel like other countries, especially European countries, Asian countries, they put more emphasis on the family unit. The question becomes, do you have to mandate what that looks like? Like, is it fair to try and make the family unit look uniform, okay?
Actively promoting a certain type of family.
It's a certain vision, yes.
Okay, so give us some specifics. What kind of policies are we talking about?
So they talk about eliminating marriage penalties in welfare programs, using the tax code to incentivize marriage and childbirth, and even prioritizing married father engagement in government programs.
Interesting.
So really, trying to use the levers of government to nudge people towards
towards a certain way of life,
a certain vision of what a family should look like.
All right, so here's where I feel like this gets too skewed on the conservative Republican side. And that is, a vision of what the family looks like. Like, to me, that's where you have to be more progressive in that mindset, okay? And what I mean by that is, if it's a gay couple that has adopted kids and it's a wonderful environment for that kid and they're a wonderful couple and it's a guy, two guys or two girls or whatever, I'm super cool with that and I'm supportive of all that stuff. Whereas I will say I have a feeling, and I don't think these guys will get into it, but I have a feeling that, the folks behind Project 2025, the Heritage Foundation, it's not Trump, it's the Heritage Foundation, I don't think those guys would be cool with that. And so, that's where I'm like, all right, dude, that's ridiculous. Like, you'd prefer a dysfunctional traditional family, but it's a family, versus a extremely functional, let's say, progressive type family that's, made up of two men or two women. That's where, again, that's where I think actually all the problems arise, because that's where they don't want to accept and embrace.
So it's interesting, right?
It is.
Because on one hand, they talk a lot about individual liberty and limited government.
Right.
But then they turn around and advocate for policies that feel awfully interventionist.
They do.
When it comes to people's personal lives.
It's true. And that's the paradox that runs through this entire document, right? They want a government that is both smaller in scope, but also more active in shaping certain aspects of our lives.
So they want it smaller, but also stronger in a way.
In a way, yeah. It's very targeted.
It is very targeted. Okay, so this raises all sorts of questions.
It does.
About the role of government, the limits of individual freedom, the tension between personal choice and societal values.
It's the classic conservative dilemma.
Right. And it seems like they've come down very firmly.
They have.
On one side of that.
They have.
And no easy answers there.
No easy answers at all.
And this is just the tip of the iceberg.
Oh.
Right.
This is where I really wish that people could get out of this red versus blue, Democrat versus Republican, conservative versus liberal. Like, why group yourself as something? Embrace the best of everything. But people don't think about it like that.
What else is in store for us as we delve deeper into this blueprint for a conservative America?
Well, we have a lot more to unpack.
I'm ready. Let's do it. For a document that's so focused on shrinking the government, it sure seems to have a lot of opinions on how people should live their lives.
It's a bit of a contradiction, isn't it?
It is.
This kind of like libertarian impulse combined with a very clear social agenda.
Right.
And speaking of agendas, we got to talk about China.
Oh, yeah, let's do it.
Because when it comes to China, this document is not mincing words.
No, they're not messing around, are they?
Not at all.
It's like they're saying, forget subtlety.
Right.
China's the ultimate threat.
Yeah.
And we're coming out swinging.
Yeah, 100%.
So it's a complete 180 from the free trade at all costs mentality that we've seen from some corners.
For sure.
Of the conservative movement in the past, right?
Yeah. I mean,
they're calling for aggressive action.
Yeah.
To counter Chinese influence on pretty much every front.
On every front, yeah.
All right, so again, I mean, that is an interesting point. If your entire gist is free trade, small government, capitalism, do you contradict yourself by not opening that up to the global marketplace?
So give us the rundown. What kind of action are we talking about here?
So they want to completely restructure trade deals.
Okay.
Scrutinize Chinese investment in U.S. companies.
Okay.
And potentially even decouple the two economies entirely.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, this is a level of economic warfare we haven't really seen in decades.
Wow. It's like they're looking at China and seeing like a mirror image of their ideal America, but just with opposite values and ambitions.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like the evil twin.
The evil twin, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
So it speaks to, I think, a lot of the anxieties that are driving this document, right?
It does.
Because it's not just about economics, right?
No.
It's about ideology, culture, national identity.
Absolutely.
Like they see China as this rising power.
This rival.
That is actively trying to undermine American dominance.
Yes.
On the world stage.
On every level.
And they're saying the only way to fight back is to meet force with force, to abandon any pretense of a hands-off approach and use the full weight of the government to protect American interests.
It's a very assertive.
It is.
Some might even say aggressive foreign policy stance.
Right.
All right, what's funny? I mean, at the heart of Make America Great Again, MAGA in a non-negative light, I mean, that is what it is. And then you as an American, if you are an American, you have to decide, okay, am I good with that? Like, do I want to agree to that? And do I want to agree to basically bringing manufacturing? Let's say, perfect example, bringing manufacturing back to America. Should I mandate or should I be absolutely adamant that corporations like Apple bring their manufacturing back to America so iPhones are made in America instead of being made in China?
And it's a sign, I think, of how much the conversation around China has shifted.
It really has.
Even in the last few years, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Because it used to be that concerns about China were mostly confined to economic policy circles.
Walks, right.
Right, exactly.
Trade negotiators.
Exactly.
Now we're talking about national security.
Right. Now it's like front and center in the national security debate as well.
Front and center.
So it makes you wonder, what would the world look like if these ideas were actually put into practice?
Right.
Would it lead to like a new Cold War?
Right.
Or could we find a way to coexist peacefully despite our differences?
I mean, those are the stakes, right?
This is the stakes.
And it's a question that this document doesn't really try to answer.
It doesn't really engage with that.
It doesn't. It's much more focused on asserting that China is a threat.
Right.
Laying out a path to victory, whatever that might look like.
Right. Okay, well, very interesting. Speaking of paths, let's talk about education.
Okay.
Because this document seems to be all in on school choice, framing it as this like silver bullet solution to unlocking a brighter future for American students.
Yeah, the key to everything, right.
Yeah, if only it were that simple.
Right.
Right, so they basically see traditional public schools as failing, as beholden to special interests and out of touch with the needs of parents and children.
Yep.
And their solution is to empower families.
Yeah.
By giving them more control over where their kids go to school.
School choice.
And what they learn.
Yeah.
So we're talking more charter schools, more voucher programs, less government involvement in curriculum and standards.
I want to blow it all up.
If any of you parents or educators out there are listening, I'd love your thoughts on this. I really would. I mean, obviously, I don't have enough experience with the schools because I don't have kids. So I haven't been able to kind of see what that looks like. But if you have thoughts on this, I'd love to hear them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty radical reimagining of the American education system, right?
It is. They want to fundamentally shift power away from the federal government towards individual families. They argue that this will lead to more innovation, more competition, and ultimately better outcomes for students.
Right. But isn't there a risk that this could exacerbate existing inequalities?
Well, that's the question. Right. So
what happens to students in under-resourced communities?
Right.
If funding is diverted away from public schools?
Right. Do they get left behind?
Yeah.
And, the document argues, of course, no.
Right.
This is going to level the playing field.
Right.
This is going to give all families, regardless of their income or background, access to quality education.
Right.
But, critics worry that it could create a two-tiered system where affluent families
have all the choices.
And then
everyone else is stranded.
Yeah.
So it's a classic example of how a seemingly simple solution.
Yeah, just give parents choice.
The
problem solved?
Right, can have really complex and potentially unintended consequences.
Well, and that's the thing about education, right? It's not just about, efficiency. It's not just about, choice. It's also about...
It's about equity. It's about
equity.
Opportunity.
Yeah, and those are values.
Right.
That sometimes are in tension, right?
It's tough.
So how do you balance those things?
Right.
That's the challenge.
Right. It's like trying to solve a Rubik's Cube while riding a unicycle.
Exactly.
And we haven't even touched on some of the other big themes. There's so much in this document, right? But I think what's clear is that this blueprint is about more than just tweaking policy around the edges.
This is big, bold, structural change.
This is a complete overhaul of the American social contract as we know it.
As we know it.
It's a big deal.
It's a bold vision.
It is a bold vision.
And whether you agree with it or not, it's a powerful reminder.
It is.
That ideas matter.
They do.
Right. The way we think about the role of government, the relationship between the individual and society.
Huge,
These fundamental questions shape the world we live in.
They do.
And understanding those questions, grappling with those ideas, that's what this deep dive is all about.
That's what we're here for.
Exactly.
It's like we've been on this incredible journey.
It is,
through their vision of the future.
Their ideal world, right.
Right, exactly. Or at least their ideal version of America.
But there's one thing that's been bugging me.
Okay.
For a document that claims to have all the answers.
Right.
There are some glaring omissions.
Interesting. Yeah. What's caught your eye?
We've talked about their ideas on the economy.
Yes.
On education, on the role of government.
The whole 9 yards,
But there's been almost no mention.
Okay, this is incredibly interesting because what they're about to talk about next, if you're of the mindset that someone like a Google wants to take you in a certain direction when it comes to narratives, it is very interesting that it brings these next things into the mix when they're not really covered in the document. So the question becomes, wow, that's pretty insane that it basically brings elements into the discussion or into this faux podcast episode that are not even in any of the source documents that it was given in order to analyze. All right, ready for it?
There's been almost no mention of climate change.
It's true.
And barely a whisper about, social justice issues.
It's interesting, right?
Yeah.
Because you would think that these would be
front and center
major issues for any kind of policy platform in 2025.
Exactly. And yet they're virtually absent from this document.
It's like those issues just don't exist.
Right.
In their world.
Like they've been solved or something.
Right. Or they're just we don't care.
or they're just not important.
Yeah.
Compared to some of these other things we've talked about,
Right,
like the administrative state.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Those are the real threats, yeah.
Real threats, right.
So it's a telling silence, right?
It is.
Because it reveals, I think, their priorities.
It does, yeah.
What they see as the most pressing challenges.
What keeps them up at night, yeah.
Right.
And clearly, climate change, not so much.
Not so much, yeah.
Which, I mean, look, we could talk all day about whether that's, short-sighted or not.
Right, but the document itself doesn't really...
It doesn't, it's just not there.
Which makes you wonder what would happen if this blueprint actually became reality.
Right. Would these issues just magically disappear?
Right. Would they just fade into the background?
Right.
Or would they, resurface with a vengeance?
Would we regret having ignored them?
Right, exactly.
Because they don't go away just because we don't want to talk about them.
Exactly. So... I don't know.
Good question, right?
It's a sobering thought, right?
It is.
It reminds us that there are always multiple perspectives.
Always.
On any given issue.
Oh, sure.
And that even the most well-intentioned policies
absolutely
can have unintended consequences.
Yeah. The law of unintended consequences, as they say.
Right.
It's always lurking.
Always lurking.
Right.
So I think the takeaway here, for me at least, is that, we need to engage with these ideas critically.
We do.
We need to ask tough questions.
Challenge our assumptions.
And consider all sides of the issue.
Absolutely.
Because, this isn't just some abstract policy debate.
No.
Right?
Look, this is real.
This is about the future we're building.
Yeah.
The kind of country
we're going to live in.
We want to live in.
Our kids are going to live in.
Exactly.
This is the legacy we're leaving behind.
Exactly. And that's a conversation.
Yeah.
That we all need to be a part of.
We all have a stake in this.
So, to our listener out there.
Yeah.
Don't just take our word for it.
Read it and weep.
Read the document yourself.
Or rejoice, as the case may be.
Right, exactly. Challenge its assumptions. Come to your own conclusions.
Think for yourself.
Exactly.
That's all we ask.
Exactly. And most importantly, decide for yourself what you believe.
What kind of world do you want to live in?
Exactly.
What kind of country do we want to be?
Because the future isn't something that just happens to us.
Right.
It's something we create.
We have agency.
Together.
Yes.
Through our choices.
Yes.
And our actions.
And our actions, yeah. That's a powerful thought to leave you with.
It is. Until next time, keep diving deep.
Keep those brains engaged.
Keep asking questions.
Stay curious.
And keep those thinking caps on.
And we'll see you next time.
There you have it. Man, I don't know. I found that incredibly interesting. First of all, I just think that is insane how realistic that sounded, And remember, this is like version 1.0 of this thing. Obviously, it doesn't mention specific names or things like that. I think there's privacy concerns that I'm sure, are taking into consideration. But the fact that it created such a free-flowing discussion that, to me, again, I would say 95% of people, if they had just heard it without knowing that was created by a language model and by AI, gosh, maybe even 99% of people wouldn't really know that was fake. That's pretty scary, actually. That's pretty scary. And then secondly, I was a little bit surprised, like I talked earlier, that it wasn't more negative because, most of the media and press obviously has been negative, and that's why I didn't feed it those articles. I could have fed it a bunch more stuff. Maybe I'll do another version of it where I'll feed the 900-page document, but then I'll feed a ton more links. That actually would be interesting to see what direction it took then. But anyway, so that is Notebook LM from Google. Hopefully that was cool. Hopefully that was fun. We haven't talked new AI stuff. I do need to do kind of a summary AI, what's going on episode, which I will. And that's about it, man. That is about it. So anyway, hey, let me know what else you guys want me to keep talking about. Seriously, I get a lot of great feedback from people when they say, hey, I'd love to hear more about this, or I'd love to hear more about that. So anyway, keep the comments coming. I love the discussions. I love getting the random text messages from friends who want to chime in on something or discuss something. Those make my day. So that's about it, everybody. Call a spade, and we'll talk to you soon.
That was a great way to end it. This episode was brought to you by the new book, Deep Shallow Dive Into You, available now on Amazon and Barnes & Noble in hardcover and paperback. Don't forget to sign up for our new mailing list on our website at deepshallowdive.com.